Okay, so anyone wants to share what came out from the breakout group? This time we stayed in the same one, so we can share about everything that came out, even the first question, the second question. But yeah, most importantly, the third one, because it relates to the study group.
And just to restate the third question for those watching the recording, we were asking what could the study group do to help increase the support that you receive to be able to live a regenerative life?
Can I say something on this?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a little bit more color to what prompted the question for me on Saturday, at least. And you know, I think the additional sort of dimension there, context there really is, you know, what does one do when you don't feel like your whole family, or particularly your partner, is in alignment, right, with or in complete alignment with what needs to be done or regeneratively, or what the predicament is, and all that. So if your spouse is not on the same page, what are the steps you can do with him or her and your family to really just feel like you're moving in the right direction, as opposed to feeling, sometimes I just feel so trapped, right? I just feel so isolated. I do what I can. Sometimes it rubs people the wrong way within the household. And so that, you know, and then in my group, when I sort of shared that, you know, I learned that, hey, you know, I'm not the only one, right? You know, I think everybody to some degree is experiencing a bit of tension here and there, and that their spouses or partners are not 100% aligned. And just hearing from those stories and the details was just so empowering, and not empowering, but comforting, and also set me at ease quite a bit. And so I know I'm sure I'm not the only one, you know. So, you know, I think putting together, you know, I feel like putting together some sort of support network for folks who want to do something with their families would be really helpful, I think, for folks out there. And you know, I don't really have any concrete ideas at the moment as to how that support network would take, but I feel that there's power in sharing these stories, personal stories, as a first step, and then, you know, maybe developing a set of resources as, okay, here are some gradual steps you can take, you know. And everybody's context is different, I think. So, you know, just being able to see that diversity is going to be really helpful, I think.
If I could comment and follow up here, this is actually, I had a comment in our group that, Julian, you're helping me kind of see it resolve on an even more granular level, and it's kind of a framing comment in that, you know, I started to come to see this community with the Earth Regenerators study group as I think I referred to it, if each of us is an individual regenerative shaman in the communities we live in, this place is a shaman convention. Like, it's a place where you can come together to be with the others that are also filling this role, but how we might feel in our communities that we might be a little crazy or missing the point, or, you know, everybody's gonna eventually convince me that I'm the one that's wrong. Having this group here helps me remember, you know, what I'm standing in, and that it's not that I'm wrong, it's that, you know, it's just so, you know, the ppm of this mindset in community is just diluted. And so having this community here helps. And then, Julian, your comment there at the family level, it's like, even, I guess, more so than the community. Like, if your family is not aligned, you can definitely really quickly feel, like you said, isolated and crazy. And so just to be able to reinforce the sort of certainty and the truth of the stand that we're taking collectively, you know, would help. And Ellen, ppm, parts per million, I'm kind of referring to like carbon in the atmosphere. So
okay.
Anyhow, that for me, and you know, I think the structures and scaffolding will pop up eventually over time in the site. Like, you know, maybe there's certain groups that we check in with, or maybe, you know, we have a a buddy. I mean, in my spiritual community, we have Sangha and prayer partners, and it's like maybe you just have somebody that you can touch base with when you're feeling a little off kilter, just to get regrounded and recentered in the work here. That could be one way that we could move this forward and, you know, more collectively.
To build off of what Geoff was saying, I think it's a good idea with this, you know, pairing or kind of peers, I guess. You can kind of build off of like, see if you, like there are some dimensions along which we could identify that would be, identify good peers, like the age of the kids you're raising is a big thing. So you can imagine kind of cohorts. You can also imagine that people who have older kids who went through could be good mentors, a mentor for people with younger kids for helping them kind of see where some of the trajectory is. Julian was saying how you know, you might have a partner that isn't completely aligned, and then there are those of us who have pretty aligned partners. So it might be important to match someone with someone who, you know, if you don't have someone who's aligned as a partner, someone else who doesn't have someone aligned as a partner has someone to be able to relate to and kind of share issues. So there might be some kind of more specific, like if we do something that's more kind of supportive of pairing people up, there's some dimensions that might be important to be able to use in that kind of matchmaking process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to drop in and say, those of you who know me personally, my wife and I are like, we do bike touring together, and it's unusual for people who do bike touring to see couples doing it. It's usually solo, and it's usually men who are doing bike touring. And so when we're on the road and we run into another touring cyclist, and they always ask me, how did you talk your wife into this? And then Jessica and I laugh. And I'm like, Jessica planned the trip. Jessica was the one who made sure I was training in time for us to go. Jessica was the one who made sure that I scheduled my work to be done in a way that I would not be thinking about it while we're on the trip. I didn't talk her into this. She talked me into it. And just seeing how powerful it is when you're aligned. And certainly the way we're raising our daughter is only possible because we are completely aligned on it. And so just want to stress that this is an insight about coherence for transformational change that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. That, and actually my friend Felipe Medina, who I came here to be with his family that created the Escuela del Bosque in Colombia, he had learned from working with a Jesuit priest who did a lot of peace building work in Colombia during the time of conflict, that the only way to do social organizing was to work with entire families. If you worked with individuals, it never worked. But if you could create a pathway of change for entire families, then the community could change. And so it was a deep, like practical insight. And here we're seeing an example of it in what Julian is saying about not being aligned with your partner. We cannot create regenerative communities without entire families walking the path. Now that doesn't mean it's only for families with children, but it's a threshold, it's a criteria. If it doesn't work for families with kids, it doesn't work. And so this is something for us to design for that I'm just not seeing out there in the regenerative design conversation, but I think we will eventually if all of us can spread the good news about it, that this is a really important insight.
Julian, can I ask a question? How, when you talk about not aligned, like, is it, you know, a little bit of a tuning, or is it like different values underlying the relationship? And I think in each case, there's like different interventions to, you know, to create coherence, as Joe would say. And, you know, what's your take on like sort of the spread of how, you know, what would be needed in your circumstance?
Okay. Well, you know, we can get into the gory details separately, but I mean, I would just say that it's pretty significant. It's pretty significant a gap. But, you know, I guess this raises another question is that, you know, for families, for those of us who, I mean, on the one hand, like, as much as I would like to be 100% aligned, I also have learned the hard way that you can't really expect to change somebody, right? Completely, right? It is not only difficult to do, but it's also, I think, probably the wrong thing to expect. And so with that in mind, and I agree with Joe that it's going to be extremely difficult to undertake the kind of transformation that we all want if you don't even have your ducks in a row at the family unit level. So with that in mind, then I feel like, short of that ideal, what are the steps that I can take, like we can take still, right? Notwithstanding the fact that we don't have a family unit completely seeing eye to eye on everything. Like, I feel like there's got to be some part that we can play, and things that we can do. And I haven't really thought about this in those terms before, to be frank. And Joe, I think I'm really glad that you've sort of raised this to a consciousness that the family unit's going to be extremely important to think about in terms of social change. But with that in mind, like it's something that I really want to sort of pursue, and really identify.
Yeah, thank you for this beautiful sharing of everyone being vulnerable and open on this topic. And it'd be lovely to hear other sharings and reflections as well for the rest of what we've done today.
I can.
Oh, and Ellen, you said something. Oh, please, yeah,
no,
jump on in.
You finish. No, you go ahead.
No, I was just, I was inviting more conversation, so please, your timing is perfect, Ellen. Thank you.
Okay, I think I can kind of summarize a little bit, and to honor the struggle that Julian, you've shared. I appreciate that. I am 72 years old, a divorcee, and the way that I overlap in my origins with this group is that I met Joe through my profession at a world conference for the contextual behavioral science. So I come from a mental health job. And the one thing we did in our small group with Karina and Donnie was I shared a huge amount of joy I get in this study group because I wish to be much more useful to our Earth. And in my age, I grieve a great deal for the damage I see around me and have felt quite helpless to change it. But in my small way, I ordered a permaculture consult to my backyard. And then this morning, had the lady who helps me, because I have some disabilities, the lady who helps me came, and I taught her right while we did planting in my garden. I taught her how to plant. And it was very extremely joyful. And so what I want to share too is I get a great deal from the joy that Joe and others show as we do touch the earth, and as you raise your child, Elise. I don't have children of my own, so I use everyone else's children to foster them as I can. And this woman, she has 5 children of her own, and so she comes back home and tells them, what joy it was to smell the sage in my backyard and so forth. And so this gives me a sense that maybe I can be useful in this way as well. Offering and inviting by sharing the joy of the outcome, as Joe understands, is much better than the struggle mentally. We let go of the struggle to change thoughts or push ideas. And that's part of the contextual behavioral science that Joe and I share. Letting go of the messages and honoring and being compassionate and taking our time to be imperfect people always, with compassion to ourselves, even in a difficult situation like an unaligned situation. Just be compassionate and allow good enough parenting, never perfect, always stumbling and making mistakes, and good enough marriage and good enough this or that, or maybe leaving a marriage in my case. We're very imperfect beings, but I love how much people are moving towards the value of helping the Earth's health. It's a healing process, and it brings me to tears. Thank you.
That's just beautiful, Ellen. The focus on joy in our, I think it was our second round breakout for our group. We talked really, I guess I sort of did a little monologuing for a moment because I'm guilty of that, as my friends know. Talking about enlivenment, what it means to feel more alive, that energy of aliveness, which is an indication that you have been regenerative. It's a body-based indicator of being regenerative. And so, Ellen, you're speaking to that eloquently right now. And so I just wanted to name it, as it tells you you are being regenerative when you feel more joy. And so that feedback in your body is very important. And just honoring the gift you're giving right now with more justification that it's really an important insight. And are there other thoughts and reflections for the breakout sessions and for just for this conversation in general?
Yeah, I've got some feedback to give, or really thoughts that have been coming up for me as I've been listening, is that there's no tension in my family home. It's just me and my 17-year-old daughter, who caught me talking about her earlier and has gone out and slammed the door, by the way. But but there's a tension between myself and my parents, and I live quite physically close to my parents, and when we're able to, we visit. But a lot of the discussions we have and the questions I get is about them trying to figure out whether I'm coming back to business as usual or not. And that hooks into my childhood trauma so deeply and so quickly. I'm finding it difficult as I move forward with my regenerative new life. I'm finding it increasingly difficult to go back and spend time with my parents. And so I'm having a sense of grief around that. But at the same time, I am having more passion for them as well. So there are lots of interesting different tensions of emotions and thoughts. Yeah, and I just know I'm going to get difficult questions from my father in particular, who's very patriarchal and, you know, when are you going to get a proper job kind of thing. Yeah.
Just want to name that this is actually why social change is so hard, and also why it's so important for us to find social support. A lot of this is around scaffolding of relationships. And that becomes very evident as you walk away from your scaffolding. Walk away from your social supports of the old life, and you'll start to find how much you depended on it and how much you have to invent anew or find somewhere else, which is why those of us doing this work need to create these scaffolds for each other and for others who come, so this can happen more quickly. My first podcast I did when I started the Center for Applied Cultural Evolution was about how my life didn't have social scaffolding. And that's why my life was so difficult. And so that's been an insight I've carried into all of this work. And we can see it now in these conversations, just how important it is to recognize the breakdown of the scaffolding as part of the work. And it can be quite difficult. Are there other thoughts, reflections, things people would like to share? And Diego, I apologize, I've sort of taken over the facilitation.
Just real quick, I want to just apologize to the people that I bopped out on without meaning to. So it wasn't that I was trying to leave you, Gail and Trial and Julian, but I figured you probably figured it out, but I just wanted to apologize because here you are and here I am. Okay.
I just wanted to add that any conversation about family and breaking, the business as usual is a conversation that should include talking about breaking gender roles and the unequal weight on women who share more of the emotional labor, but also real labor in the household, especially with raising children. And makes me nervous talking about it because I'm not a parent yet, but I know that it's going to be a struggle to meet maybe the right person who can understand that I can't, this has to be an effort that's shared by my partner, because I think that the parenting that I seek, the one that's regenerative for me, is one that's very shared in both parents or a community or, a group of people working together, whether that's a partnership, a marriage, or whatever. So I just wanted to name that how important it is to also talk about breaking gender roles and acknowledging, the importance of hearing women and mothers and what they need and what they're looking for and for regenerative, and even having, the possibility for mothers to also be more than mothers, or, to be just mothers and not be judged and held to that double standard, and whatever they feel is right for them. And I like your story, Joe, about how people just automatically assume it's you having to convince your wife to do this, which is so common. And I mean, that resonates with me so much. I have a friend who's going to move to South Korea to do her fellowship for climate science, and she's engaged. And people are shocked. It's like, why are you leaving your partner? Because he can't go because he runs this huge company. But if it were the other way around and he was leaving to go do a fellowship or do some work abroad, she would go with him. That would be the expectation. And it just is so enraging that we can't acknowledge the fact that we can have long distance relationships. We can create different kinds of family units that work for us, whatever that means. If that means, long distance or not, that means having the mother who works and the father who stays at home. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more of that, as in, if the father wants to be a stay-at-home father, there's nothing wrong with that. Or even breaking the mold and going one step further and saying we don't have to have that dichotomy of stay-at-home and one going to work. And part of that is definancialization, right? And being able to actually afford having more parents' time at home and being with their kids.
So just a word of encouragement. My nephew actually is the one who stays home and takes care of their autistic child while his wife works. She has a better salary. It was just made sense, so they have worked it out and it's working fine.
It's good to hear.
I wanted to add something with Anna, that I think it's the core, the root for also being regenerative is how we embrace our femininity and our masculinity, those forces, not duality, femininity is this and masculinity is this, not just this big dance that lives among us ourselves and also in our partners, and how we understand this as in our roles, like a father and mother. For example, watching you here is there are many men but not women in this chat also, because it's typical that the mother is taking care of the kids while the man is doing these important things like sharing with other person or lecturing or something. And so we are trying with our partner to do that, but it's really been a challenging path, embracing this new way of watching us just as humans and not with these role models in society.
Exactly. Part of parenting is also demonstrating that it doesn't have to be so dual, binary.
Yeah, something that I learned as an insight sort of surprised me because it was one of those facts in front of my face for years, which is that maleness is simply an extension of femaleness biologically. That there were 2.4 billion years of only females, mothers and daughter cells of bacteria. And then eventually sexual reproduction was invented. And what sexual reproduction does is it creates maleness as an extension of female reproduction. And it literally, everything I'm saying is just biological fact. That's all it is. But we are so much not taught to think that, which means that also men can embrace their reproductive creative support roles as well in a completely wholesome and legitimate way. It goes in both directions. It validates the feminine as being the fundamental life force without excluding men. Men are just included within it, but we have to recognize that that's actually what's true. And it is true, which is pretty awesome.
And that it's also a spectrum. It's not necessarily one or the other, and it can be changing for one person within a day or within a lifetime.
And I'll throw in that I agree. I think there's a great deal of merit to recognizing how our political systems, I'm in America, our political systems have gotten very patriarchal, as Rachel mentioned, and so far away from that original biological cell with the feminine originating, the indigenous femininity, but also the hormone condition that I have that caused me to have miscarriages and infertility is a kind of a hormonal androgyny. And I have bisexuality, and I'm out with that. And the fluidity and the gender, spectrum is very much a part of who I am. But oftentimes we run into societal, boxes and not understanding the colorfulness and the possibilities of having so much of all of the spectrum of who we are and can be. So I think that political reality is over here, and we have to pay attention to how it both creates that scaffolding and also might put us into traps that we need to work with. I'll be quiet.
Please don't be quiet. We like what you have to say, Ellen.
But I can hog the time just like you do, Joe. If you can, we can be fire hoses. I can compete with you on the fire hose too.
I have faith in your abilities.
There's something coming up for me at the moment that's been rummaging around for a while, and the more regenerative that I feel I'm getting with the group I'm working with, the more dangerous it feels as a woman, because and there's something here about very sort of almost pre-Christianity, possibly, when there was more of a pagan thing going on here with the ancient Britons, and what I'm reading recently is about the women looking after the water sources, the natural water sources, and the women being that kind of paganism where it's perfectly natural to be close to nature and for women to have a revered role in the community, and celebrating the feminine, and then something about Christianity appearing and churches being built over the natural water sources that the pagan women are tending, and then the women being burnt as witches and basically being, this incredibly scary. It must have been so scary as a woman to, I mean, me and my daughter both think that we definitely would have been burnt as witches. But it feels like I feel such a strong sense of wanting to be able to connect with that feminine role from that time and to bring it into the future. But it feels dangerous because it's very directly challenging the patriarchy. And I think that some men that I talk to about what I do, I think they feel challenged by it. They're not quite sure why, but I think this is potentially one of the things that's going on. So it feels like some men want to bash me down and shut me up and stop me from what I'm doing. It feels like there's almost like an inherited thing going on through the centuries, and we need to talk about this. Yeah, just that really.
Yeah, one thing I was feeling to add at this moment is that I think a lot of people would look through the webinars for the study group and see the one on the Earth Regeneration Fund as the most powerful and threatening because it's about money. But actually, I think the discussion of parenting is more powerful and more dangerous.
Yeah.
And so as we're feeling in this conversation, feel how much deeper and more energetic our emotional tone is, not in what's being said, but what's in what's being felt. You know, it's not that we're saying it in a strong way, it's that we're speaking to strong things. And it really is, we're touching something very important with this conversation. And just wanted to name that because my wife and I choosing, like, I remember a litmus test we had when we came back to the US from Costa Rica last fall. And Jessica's mother was trying to suggest places in the US that we should live. And Jessica said, here's one of my criteria, Mom. No one in the town shops at Walmart. Even one person shops at Walmart, I don't want to go. And that's when Jessica's mother realized how serious we were. Like, oh, we're not going to live anywhere in the United States. And, you know, that was the way of signaling how deep the change was that we're trying to make for our family. And you can feel it. Those of you who are in the US or maybe Canada as well, to not be near a Walmart is a big deal. Like, you have to get pretty far away from that culture to get away from that. And so it shows you how, you know, we chose to move away from family. We did something powerful, which means it's also got risks associated with it. And so I just wanted to name that this conversation about parenting is actually a really power-oriented conversation. We're dealing with powerful things.
I think we have to wrap up. I mean, we are 10 minutes more than expected, but we can stay. I mean, I can stay. It's so interesting. I just want to ask if people who didn't have a chance to speak want to share something. I was more quiet because I feel that this conversation is, as Joe was saying, it's bringing up something more vulnerable, and also there's a kind of fluidity. So my English doesn't allow me to, you know, perceive me as fluid enough to, you know, intervene, etc. And I think there's also a language diversity problem or potential in this study group, actually. And yeah, with my broken accent, I feel at odd in this group, but I believe there should be more people from other countries as well. And but having said that, if somebody else that didn't speak before wants to share something, or, and I saw Geoff that you wanted to say something. And
while that person is unmuting, I just wanted to thank you, Diego, for specifically calling out in the presentation that in our small groups, we should speak from where we feel, not what our thoughts or ideas say. Because with Joe's observation there, like, it wasn't accidental that the feeling and vulnerability and depth happened here today. Like, you invited that in explicitly, and that really like it changed as I went into the groups. It completely changed where I was coming from. So just thank you for setting that expectation for us.
Thank you, Geoff. So I think people are saying goodbye, so probably we are gonna stop here, and I think there needs to be more occasion like that, and for sure we're gonna offer more. Thanks, everybody.
It's good to see you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you.
So much.
Yes, thank you all. And if anyone wants to suggest ideas for the study group, just reach out to me in a message through the study group or through some other means. And we can talk about ways to continue connecting. We'll have another webinar in about 2 weeks, continuing the cycle. And but at any time, reach out. I'm very happy to co-create for all of this.
Thank you. When we will meet again? I didn't listen that.
These webinars happen every 2 weeks. Yeah, we have webinars every second week, and then we do the Zoom calls the following Monday. So the webinars are on Saturday and the Zoom calls are on Mondays.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye, Karina and Dani too. It was nice to get to
Thanks, Helen and Dani, to share.